Captain Jake Murphy sat in his command chair watching the stars streak past the view screen. The Terra Nova was a good ship. Not the biggest or fastest in the human fleet, but reliable. For 3 years now, Jake had taken her on peaceful missions. Across the galaxy, trade runs, diplomatic visits, science surveys, and nothing exciting, but that was how most humans liked it these days. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of engines. Lisa Carter worked at her communications station, monitoring. The usual chatter between ships and stations. Ben Rodriguez checked the navigation systems while Kate Wilson kept an eye on the engine readings. Dr. Sam Parker was probably down in sickbay reading medical journals. Sergeant Alex Thompson and his Marines were likely in the gym, staying ready for trouble that never seemed to come. Jake liked his crew. They were good people who did their jobs well. Most of them had never seen real combat. Why would they? The humanity had been at peace for over 200 years. The Galactic Federation made sure everyone followed the rules. Wars were things you read about in history books. The Terra Nova was heading to the Kitharos system to deliver medical supplies. The people there were friendly plant-like beings who made excellent medicines from their native flowers. It was supposed to be a simple 3-day trip, drop off the supplies, maybe enjoy some of their famous fruit wines, then head home. Lisa suddenly sat up straight at her station. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange." Jake turned to look at her. "What kind of strange?" "It's a distress signal, but it's really weak. Almost like it's coming from very far away." Lisa worked at her controls, trying to clean up the signal. "I think it's from the Verdania system." Jake knew that name. Verdania Prime was home to the Zilani, one of the most peaceful races in the galaxy. They were plant-like creatures who spent their time growing beautiful gardens and thinking deep thoughts about life. The idea of them sending a distress call seemed impossible. "Can you clear it up?" Jake asked. Lisa's fingers flew over her keyboard. "I'm trying." "The signal is really bad, like it's been damaged or something." She paused, listening to her headphones. "Wait, I think I've got something." She put the signal on the main speakers. At first, there was only static. Then a voice came through. It sounded scared and desperate. "Please, anyone who can hear this." The ships came without warning. Black ships with no flags, no identification. "They're taking our people, taking our children." The voice was speaking, Galactic Standard, but with a heavy accent. Jake recognized it as Zilani. Speaker sounded old and tired. "We tried to surrender. We offered them everything we had, but they just kept taking people. Hundreds of them, thousands. We don't know how to fight. We've never learned how to fight." Jake felt something cold in his stomach. The Zilani were completely peaceful. They didn't even have a military. Their whole society was built around growing things and helping each other. The voice continued. "If anyone receives this message, please help us. We are dying. Our children are gone. The black ships are everywhere. Don't know what else to do." The signal cut to static, then died completely. The bridge was silent for a long moment. Jake looked around at his crew. Lisa had gone pale. Ben was staring at the speakers like he couldn't believe what he'd heard. Even tough Sergeant Thompson, who had come up from below when he heard the commotion, looked shocked. "How far is Verdania Prime?" Jake asked. Ben checked his navigation computer. "About 6 days at maximum speed. Any other ships closer?" Lisa shook her head. "I've been monitoring all Federation channels. There's no response to the distress call. No ships heading that way." Jake thought about this. The Federation was supposed to protect peaceful worlds like Verdania. That was the whole point of having a galaxy-wide government. But maybe they hadn't heard the signal yet. Maybe the Terra Nova was the only ship in range. "Contact Federation Command," Jake ordered. "Send them a copy of that signal and ask for instructions." It took 2 hours for the reply to come back. When it did, Jake couldn't believe what he was reading. Admiral Grace Foster's face appeared on the main screen. She looked tired and frustrated. "Captain Murphy, I've reviewed the situation at Verdania Prime. I'm afraid there's nothing we can do." "Nothing we can do?" Jake repeated. "Admiral, they're being attacked by slavers. The attackers are operating from outside Federation space." Foster explained. Any military action would violate the non-interference treaty we signed with the Outer Rim Confederacy. Our hands are tied. Jake felt anger building in his chest. So we just let innocent people die? Captain, I understand your feelings, but we have laws to follow. Federation Council has voted not to intervene. Foster paused, then added quietly, the attacking force has been estimated at over 300 ships. Even if we wanted to help, we don't have enough firepower to stop them. The transmission ended, leaving Jake staring at a blank screen. 300 ships. That was more than most Federation sector fleets. No wonder Command didn't want to get involved. But Jake couldn't stop thinking about that desperate voice. An old Zilani begging for help, watching his people being stolen by strangers, children being taken from their families. It made him sick. Captain, Lisa asked quietly. What are we going to do? Jake looked around his bridge. These people trusted him to make the right decisions. For 3 years, the right decision had always been to follow orders and keep everyone safe. But this felt different. He thought about his own children back on Earth. What if it was them being taken?
Ow.
What if it was human children calling for help while the galaxy looked the other way? Lisa, open a direct channel to Earth Command. Priority, sir. Just do it. The connection took several minutes to establish. Finally, the Earth's command logo appeared on screen. Followed by Admiral Carol Hayes. She was an older woman with gray hair and sharp eyes who had been running Earth's military for over a decade. Captain Murphy, what can I do for you? Jake took a deep breath. What he was about to say hadn't been spoken in over 2 centuries. The words felt strange in his mouth, like he was speaking an ancient language. Admiral Hayes, I hereby request activation of Protocol Omega. Admiral Hayes went very still. Her eyes narrowed as she studied Jake's face. Captain, do you understand what you're asking? Yes, ma'am. There are innocent people dying, and the Federation won't help them. Someone has to. Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. I'll need a full report on the situation. Send me everything you have. Yes, ma'am. Captain, you better be sure about this. Once Protocol Omega is activated, there's no going back. Transmission ended. Jake sat back in his chair, suddenly realizing what he had just done. Protocol Omega hadn't been used since the Centauri Rebellion almost a century ago. Most people had forgotten it even existed, but Jake remembered the stories his grandfather used to tell, stories about what humanity could do when pushed too far. When good people were threatened and no one else would act, the galaxy was about to remember why Earth was classified as a death world, and why the creatures who lived there were not as peaceful as they seemed. Admiral Carol Hayes stood at the window of her office, looking out at the lights of New York City. The city had been rebuilt 3 times in human history, each time bigger and brighter than before. Tonight, those lights seemed different somehow. More urgent Protocol Omega. She hadn't heard those words in 87 years, not since she was a young lieutenant during the Centauri crisis. Back then, she had watched humanity's war machine wake up from its peaceful sleep. It had been terrifying, and beautiful at the same time. Her communication device buzzed. Captain Murphy's full report was coming through. Hayes read it carefully, studying every detail about the attack on Verdania Prime. The Zilani were good people who had never hurt anyone. They grew healing plants and shared them freely with anyone who needed help. The thought of slavers taking their children made her blood boil. Hayes walked to her desk and pressed a button that connected her to every human military base in the galaxy. The emergency channel hadn't been used in over a century. Tonight, it would carry the most important message in human space. This is Admiral Carol Hayes, Earth Command. Authorization, Omega 77 Alpha. All units, all reserves, all retired personnel, listen carefully. She paused, knowing that her next words would change everything. Slavers are attacking peaceful worlds. Children are being taken. The Federation will not act. We will. She sent Murphy's report along with her message, then sat back and waited. She didn't have to wait long. The first response came from Mars Defense Command. Admiral Ryan Clark's voice crackled through the speakers. Carol, you're really doing this. Ryan, read the report. Then tell me we shouldn't. There was silence for several minutes. Hayes could imagine Clark reading about the Zelani children, the desperate calls for help, the Federation's refusal to act. When he spoke again, his voice was hard as steel. How long do we have? Unknown. Could be days, could be hours. Understood. Mars Command is mobilizing. We'll have the first battle group ready in 6 hours. More responses flooded in. Europa Base, Titan Station, the asteroid mining colonies, even the deep space research stations. Every human facility with military capability was offering to help. But it wasn't just the military responding, Captain. Captain Nicole Davis contacted Hayes. From the civilian shipyards of Luna, Admiral, we have 12 cargo haulers here that could be converted to troop transports. My crews are already installing weapon mounts. Captain Steve Collins called from the freight hub at Jupiter Station. Ma'am, I've got 43 cargo vessels here with volunteer crews. We're not military, but we can carry supplies and reinforcements. Dr. Maria Lopez sent a message from the research facility on Ganymede. Admiral Hayes, I've been studying the technology salvaged from previous slaver attacks. I'm bringing my full research team and everything we know about their tactics. Hayes watched her tactical display light up with green dots as human ships across the galaxy began moving. It was like watching a sleeping giant slowly wake up and stretch its muscles. Ships that hadn't moved in years were powering up their engines. Crews that had become comfortable with peaceful cargo runs were checking weapon systems. They hoped they'd never need to use. The response was bigger than Hayes had expected. Within 12 hours, over 200 ships had volunteered for the mission. Some were military vessels pulled from patrol duties or taken out of storage. Others were civilian ships with hastily installed weapons. A few were private vessels owned by humans who simply couldn't stand the thought of innocent people suffering, but the biggest surprise came from outside human space. Commander Zixtai of the Kalari warrior monks sent a message that made Hayes smile for the first time in days. Admiral Hayes, the Kalari remember when human warriors fought beside us during our civil war? You taught us that sometimes violence is the only answer to evil. Today, we return that lesson. 6 temple ships are en route to join your fleet. Hayes knew the Kalari temple ships. Each one was a mobile monastery filled with warrior monks who had trained their entire lives for combat. They were among the finest fighters in the galaxy, and they were coming to help. The Terra Nova had become the unofficial flagship of the rescue mission. Captain Murphy found himself coordinating with ship captains he'd only heard about in stories. The legendary Captain Davis with her carrier full of fighter pilots, Captain Collins with his heavy assault ship and its famous Marine battalions, Dr. Lopez. With her science team and their knowledge of slaver technology, Murphy stood on his bridge, watching ships drop out of hyperspace around him. Each arrival brought new hope and new determination. His crew had never seen anything like it. Lisa Carter was coordinating communications between over 100 different ships. Ben Rodriguez was working with fleet navigation to plan the jump to Verdania Prime. Kate Wilson was helping other ships upgrade their weapon systems with spare parts from the Terra Nova stores. Dr. Parker had set up a mobile medical station in the cargo bay, preparing to treat rescued slaves from different alien species. Sergeant Thompson was coordinating with Marine units from across the fleet, planning the ground assault that would free the prisoner camps. The most impressive arrival was the UES Retribution, Admiral Hayes' personal flagship. The massive ship dropped out of hyperspace like a metal moon, its hull scarred from battles fought generations ago. It was a ship from humanity's violent past, built when humans had to fight for every meter of space they claimed among the stars. Hayes' voice echoed across every ship in the fleet. All vessels, this is Admiral Hayes. We are not here for conquest or glory. We are here because innocent people are suffering and no one else will help them. Some of you have never seen combat. Others fought in wars your grandchildren never heard about. It doesn't matter. What matters is that we are here and we will not let evil win. The fleet numbered almost 400 ships now. Not all of them were warships. Many were cargo vessels and mining platforms that had been hastily armed. But they were crewed by humans who had heard a call for help and answered without hesitation. Murphy received a private message from Admiral Hayes. "Captain, your ship fired the first shot of this war when you sent that distress call to Earth. I want you to know that what you did today will be remembered forever." Murphy looked around his bridge at his crew. They were scared but determined. They had volunteered for a peaceful mission and found themselves part of the largest human military operation in centuries. But none of them had asked to be reassigned. They were staying to see this through. The fleet prepared to jump to Verdania. Prime Murphy knew they might be flying into a battle they couldn't win. 300 slaver ships was a lot of firepower. But he also knew something the slavers didn't. They had never fought humans before. They had never faced creatures from a death world who were angry enough to travel across the galaxy to protect strangers. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when someone made the mistake of hurting innocent people while humans were watching. The lesson would not be gentle. Fleet Commander Vex Moliker stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the slave processing continue on Verdania Prime below. The planet's surface was dotted with temporary camps where captured Zilani waited to be loaded onto transport ships. It was going exactly as planned. The harvester fleet surrounded the planet like a swarm of black insects. 300 ships of various sizes, all designed for one purpose: taking people and selling them to the highest bidder. Vex Maliker had used the same tactics on 47 worlds. Arrive without warning, destroy any resistance, then harvest the population. Simple and effective. The Zilani had been even easier than most. They had no weapons, no military, no concept of organized violence. When the first harvester ships appeared in their sky, the plant-like beings had tried to communicate. They offered trade agreements, cultural exchanges, even their most precious botanical knowledge. Vexamaliker had responded by bombing their capital city now. 3 days later, over 200,000 Zilani were in processing camps waiting for transport to slave markets. The children would bring the highest prices. Young minds were easy to reprogram. The adults would work in the mining colonies until they died. It was profitable and efficient. Vex Moliker was reviewing the loading schedules when his sensor officer called out. "Commander, we're detecting hyperspace distortions. At the edge of the system, how many ships?" "Unknown, sir. The readings are... strange. It's like a whole fleet is arriving at once." Vex Maliker wasn't worried. The nearest Federation fleet was weeks away, and they wouldn't interfere anyway. The cowards never did. Put it on screen. What appeared on the view screen made Vex Maliker step backward in shock. Ships were dropping out of hyperspace by the dozens. Not sleek Federation vessels with diplomatic markings, but warships. Real warships, scarred and battle-tested, emerging from the void, like predators scenting blood. "Sir, I'm counting over 300 vessels," the sensor officer reported, his voice shaking. "They're all armed, heavy armed." The largest ship in the approaching fleet was a massive dreadnought that looked like it had been built for war, and nothing else. Its hull was dark metal marked with scars from old battles. As Vex Maliker watched, weapon ports opened along its sides like the eyes of some ancient beast waking up. A communication signal reached the harvester fleet. The voice that spoke was calm, but carried the promise of violence. "This is Admiral Carol Hayes of the Human Defense Force. You have enslaved peaceful worlds and murdered innocents. Surrender now or face the consequences. You have 30 seconds. Humans." Vex Maliker almost laughed. He'd heard of them, the soft creatures from the death world who spent their time growing flowers and writing poetry. The Federation had tamed them centuries ago, turned them into harmless diplomats and traders. What could they possibly do against his fleet? "Open fire on their flagship," Vex Maliker ordered. "Show these primitives what real power looks like." The harvester fleet launched a coordinated attack on the human dreadnought. Hundreds of energy beams and missiles streaked through space toward the UES Retribution. Vex Maliker smiled, expecting to see the human ship disappear in a ball of fire. Instead, he watched in horror as the human vessel's shields absorbed the attack without even flickering. Then the Retribution fired back. The return salvo was like nothing Vex Maliker had ever seen. The human ship's weapons tore through 3 harvester cruisers in seconds, reducing them to scrap metal and burning gas. But that was just the beginning. The entire human fleet opened fire at once. Space filled with the bright flashes of energy weapons and the trails of missiles. Harvester ships began exploding faster than Vex Malakar could count. These weren't the careful, limited exchanges the Federation preferred. This was total war, fought by people who understood that sometimes the only way to stop evil was to destroy it completely. Captain. Murphy watched the battle from the bridge of the Terra Nova. His ship had been assigned to attack the slave processing stations in orbit around Verdania Prime. It was dangerous work. The stations were heavily defended and filled with innocent prisoners. Ben, take us in close to processing Station 7, Murphy ordered. Kate, can you disable their shields without damaging the prisoner sections? Kate Wilson worked frantically at her engineering station. I think so, Captain. I can overload their power grid at exactly the right frequency. The Terra Nova swooped down toward the massive station, dodging defensive fire from automated weapons. Kate's plan worked perfectly. The station's shields collapsed, but the life support systems stayed online. Lisa Carter was coordinating with rescue teams throughout the fleet. Captain, the UES Thunderbolt is launching shuttles to evacuate the prisoners. Dr. Lopez says her team is ready to treat the wounded. Murphy nodded. Round them, the battle raged in all directions. Human fighters darted between harvester ships like angry wasps, their pilots flying with a precision and fury that the enemy couldn't match. The carrier-used Thunderbolt had launched over 200 fighters, each one piloted by someone who had volunteered to risk their life for strangers. On the planet's surface, Colonel Amy Chen led the ground assault against the prison camps. Marines dropped from orbit in armored pods, landing in the middle of the largest camp where thousands of Zilani were held behind. Energy barriers. The Harvester Guards had never faced determined ground troops before. They were used to terrorizing helpless civilians, not fighting trained soldiers who knew how to work as a team. The human Marines moved through the camp like a thunderstorm, destroying guard towers and freeing prisoners with deadly efficiency. Dr. Maria Lopez worked aboard the UES Discovery, coordinating the massive rescue operation. Her research into Harvester technology was proving invaluable. She knew exactly how to disable their slave collars, how to counteract their control drugs, and how to treat the various species they had captured. Admiral Hayes, we're finding prisoners from over 20 different worlds down here, Lopez reported. Some have been captives for years. The Harvesters have been doing this a long time. Admiral Hayes received the report while watching her fleet systematically destroy the Harvester forces. The enemy ships were well armed, but poorly coordinated. They fought like raiders, not soldiers. When the human fleet hit them with organized tactics and superior firepower, they crumbled. The Kolari Temple ships had joined the battle with devastating effect. The warrior monks fought with a combination of advanced technology and ancient combat, wisdom that made them nearly unstoppable. Commander Zixtai personally led boarding parties against Harvester command ships, his warriors moving through enemy corridors like shadows of death. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it was over, the Harvester fleet was nothing but debris floating in space around Verdania Prime. Fleet Commander. Vex Molakar's flagship burned as its crew abandoned ship in whatever escape pods still functioned. Murphy stood on his bridge, exhausted but satisfied. Round Verdania Prime, hundreds of rescue ships were ferrying freed slaves to medical facilities. The Zilani survivors were being reunited with their families. Children who had been stolen from their homes were going back to their parents, but Murphy knew this was just the beginning. Dr. Lopez's intelligence reports showed that the Harvesters were part of a much larger criminal network. There were other fleets, other slave markets, other worlds suffering in silence while the galaxy looked away. The humans had sent a message today. They had shown the galaxy what happened when someone made the mistake of hurting innocent people while Deathworlders were watching. Now they had to decide what to do next. Admiral Carol Hayes stood in the main cargo bay of the UES Retribution, watching as the last group of freed slaves was transferred to medical ships. The bay was filled with beings from dozens of different worlds. Some she recognized, others were completely new to her. All of them had the same look in their eyes, the hollow stare of people who had given up hope and suddenly found it again. A young Zilani child approached her. Moving slowly on thin green legs, the child looked up at Hayes with large, dark eyes and spoke in broken Galactic Standard. "Thank you for bringing us home." Hayes knelt down to the child's level. "What's your name?" "I am called Small Bloomin' Spring. The bad people took me from my garden pod 3 cycles ago. I thought I would never see my family again." "Well, Small Bloomin' Spring, you're going home now, and the bad people won't be taking anyone else." The child nodded solemnly, then did something that surprised Hayes. Small Bloom reached into a pouch on his side and pulled out a tiny seed. "This is from my family's garden. Will you plant it on your world, so that something beautiful from Verdania will grow on the planet of the brave warriors?" Hayes took the seed carefully. It was smaller than her fingernail, but felt heavier than a weapon. "I promise I will plant it myself." After the child was led away to join his family, Hayes remained in the cargo bay thinking. Over 300,000 beings were going home today. 300,000 people who would see their families again, who would live free lives, who would grow old in peace instead of dying as slaves. But the reports from Dr. Lopez made it clear that this was only the beginning, Captain. Murphy arrived with the latest intelligence summary. His ship had been busy for the past day, gathering information from captured harvester databases and interrogating prisoners. "Admiral, you need to see this," Murphy said, handing her a data tablet. "Dr. Lopez and her team have been analyzing everything we captured. The harvester operation was much bigger than we thought." Hayes read the report with growing anger. The criminal network stretched across 17 sectors. There were slave markets on over 40 worlds, protected by corrupt officials and enabled by Federation indifference. The harvesters hadn't just been raiding random planets, they had been systematically targeting peaceful species that couldn't fight back. "How long has this been going on?" Hayes asked. "At least 50 years, maybe longer." The Federation knew about some of it, but classified the information to avoid diplomatic complications with the Outer Rim territories. Hayes felt sick. While humanity had been enjoying 2 centuries of peace, millions of innocent beings had been suffering in silence. The Federation had known and done nothing. The galaxy's protectors had become enablers of evil. Admiral Murphy continued, "There's something else. We're getting reports from across human space. Volunteer fleets are forming on every colony world. The message you sent has reached everyone, and they're all asking the same question. What do we do next?" Hayes walked to the window and looked out at Verdania Prime. The planet's surface was still scarred from the harvester attack, but she could see lights beginning to come back on in the cities. The Zilani were rebuilding, but they would never be the same. They had learned that the galaxy was a dangerous place where good people needed protectors. Her communication device buzzed. President John Turner was calling from Earth. "Carol, I've been watching the reports from Verdania Prime. The whole galaxy is talking about what happened there. Mr. President, we saved over 300,000 people, but that's just the start. The intelligence we've gathered shows this criminal network is enormous. I know. I've read Dr. Lopez's preliminary report. The question is, what do we do?" "About it?" Hayes thought about Small Bloomin' Spring and his tiny seed. She thought about all the other children who were still trapped in slave markets across the galaxy, waiting for someone to care enough to save them. "Mr. President, I think it's time the galaxy remembered something important. Humanity didn't become peaceful because we forgot how to fight. We became peaceful because we chose to be. But when evil threatens innocent people, we choose to fight." Turner was quiet for a moment. "You want to go after the entire network?" "I want to make sure no one ever has to send a desperate distress call again, wondering if anyone in the galaxy cares enough to help. That's a big job, Carol. It could take years. It could change everything about how we relate to the rest of the galaxy." Hayes looked around the cargo bay where families were being reunited after years of separation. Some things are worth changing. 4. The next day, President Turner addressed not just humanity, but the entire galaxy. He commandeered every communication network he could reach. ensuring his message would be heard on every world, in every system. For 200 years, humanity has sought peace among the stars. We followed Federation law, respected alien customs, and tried to be good neighbors. We believed that civilization meant everyone was safe, that the strong protected the weak, that justice was more than just a word. The president's image appeared on screens across thousands of worlds. In Federation Council chambers, alien diplomats watched nervously. On colony worlds, oppressed populations listened with growing hope. Yesterday, we learned that our trust was misplaced. While we lived in peace, others suffered in silence. Children were stolen from their families. Entire civilizations were harvested like crops. And the galaxy's leaders did nothing. Turner paused, letting his words sink in. Today that changes. It's the slavers, pirates, and tyrants who prey on the weak. Your time is over. To the corrupt officials who enable such evil, we are coming. To the peaceful species who suffer in silence, you are not alone. Peace. Received reports from across human space within hours of the president's speech. The shipyards of Mars had resumed warship production for the first time in a century. Volunteer fleets were forming on every human world. Most importantly, other species were beginning to respond. The Kalari announced they were permanently deploying temple ships to hunt slavers in their sector. Crystal and Vorthok closed their borders to all known criminal organizations. Even some Federation members began demanding investigations into the slave trade. Dr. Lopez published her complete findings about the Harvester Network, including the names of every Federation official who had covered up the slave trade. The report became the most widely distributed document in galactic history, sparking protests and rebellions across dozens of worlds. Captain Murphy prepared the Terra Nova for its next mission. They were heading to the former Harvester stronghold. In the Kepler sector, where intelligence suggested another slave market was operating, but when they arrived, they found the market already abandoned. Word of the human fleet's fury had spread faster than their ships. On a dozen worlds, corrupt officials were being arrested by their own people. On another dozen, slaver bases were being attacked by local resistance groups who had found the courage to fight back. The galaxy was waking up from 2 centuries of comfortable indifference. Admiral Hayes stood on the bridge of the Retribution, reading the latest reports. Small Bloomin' Springs seed sat in a small pot on her desk, already beginning to sprout. It would grow into something beautiful, a reminder of why some fights were worth having. The SOS had reached Earth, and the Deathworlders had answered with fury. But more than that, they had answered with hope. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly what Hayes had intended. Somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, other voices were beginning to call for help. And now they knew that someone was listening. Someone who cared enough to cross the galaxy to protect strangers. The age of looking away was over. Time of justice had begun.